So I thought I'd continue my tradition of beginning these reviews with a lovely IQOO Haiku, despite promising in the last one that I'd stop. Moral of the story, never trust a YouTube tech twat. IQOO 15, FWAR. Get right in my trousers. You. Not perfect, but lush. So the Vivo IQOO 15 is a proper beefcake flagship smartphone, boasting the freshest Snapdragon 8 Elite Gen 5 brains, a massive 7000 mAh fast charging battery, and an upgraded media experience. But is it tastier than a chip butty and sexier than 12 Michael Boltons? Well, here's my full IQOO 15 review, and for more on the latest and greatest tech, please do poke subscribe, ding that old notifications bell. Cheers! So my previous smartphone review was the Poco F8 Ultra, and the IQOO 15 is yet another absolute whopper at 6.85 inches. Despite sporting reasonably skinny bezels, it's still bloody massive, and it's got a proper heft to it as well at 220 grams. At one point I had both the IQOO 15 and that Poco monster stuffed into my trousers at the same time doing a camera comparison. I swear to God my belt was about to give up on life. My pants are certainly not accustomed to holding near 7-inch beasts. But hey, if you like them big, you're going to be satisfied. You've got a glass front and back as well. You've got a matte metal frame sandwiched between the two, and then it's a frosted glass arse. So both of those pleasingly resistant to smudgy, greasy muck. I've got to say though, that design is generally about as thrilling as the average episode of Last of the Summer Wine. And the IQOO 15 basically looks like every single smartphone in 2025. Apart from those ridiculously thin ones, of course. It's a big old chunky git, as usual, with a perfectly flat screen and flat edges. And pretty much identical colour options to before as well. This is the Legend model, but you can also snaffle the IQOO 15 in alpha or grey. Got a couple of wee flashes of flair to set the IQOO 15 apart a wee bit, though nothing particularly original. So for example, this Legend model has this tiny Monster Inside logo slapped alongside the branding, although it doesn't appear to be any racing type shenanigans tie-in for this generation. And the IQOO 15 also heralds the welcome return of that monster halo light surrounding the old camera bump there, once again completely customizable. I haven't experienced a glowing ring like this since my last chicken vindaloo. Now, as before, you can schedule this, you can have it on either all of the time, otherwise you can just have it flash on for incoming calls and notifications. You can even turn it into a full-on disco light if you want a bit of ravey-davey gravy action. And the IQOO 15 is IP68 and IP69 dust and water resistant. Can not only handle being fully submerged in water, can also tolerate a severe spurting, in case you get carried away or something. Now, like most flagship phones these days, you've got an ultrasonic fingerprint sensor built into the display here on the IQOO 15. And like most of them, it's an absolute cracker as well. It doesn't matter if your thumb is a bit moist, greasy, whatever, still tends to work absolutely fine and absolutely blistering fast, as you can see there. And you do have face unlock as well, which seems to work fine, but I barely even had to touch this, to be honest. And then once you're in there, it's got a bit of Android 16, the latest, freshest version. But it's RIP to that FunTouch launcher, because Vivo is now going full OriginOS right across the globe. And to be honest, this isn't really much different from FunTouch OS and quite similar to a lot of rivals these days, the likes of HyperOS, ColorOS, etc. And this can certainly still be a wee bit messy at times, but you've got plenty of personalization options, including the usual customizable dynamic effects. And of course, the now seemingly obligatory iPhone-style floating turd feature. Unfortunately, Vivo's still pretty bad when it comes to stacking crapware on its smartphones. Got all the classics: Agoda, Booking.Bloodycom, Facebook, LinkedIn, etc, etc. You've also got your own Vivo App Store, complete with all the kind of cack you would imagine. So yeah, I'd recommend going on a bit of a spree and just deleting as much of this bollocks as possible. And the IQOO 15 was a wee bit buggy when I first started testing it, but that was pre-launch. Could occasionally be a wee bit janky, just some juddering here and there. There's the occasional wee spot of misbehaving, but an update that came through just earlier this week seemed to sort most of that out. Touchwood has been better behaved. Still see the occasional janky animation or whatever, but overall pretty good. And also Vivo's update policy seems to have been dealt a swift kick up the jacksie as well. So you've now got 5 OS updates guaranteed and 7 full years of security patching, which is bloody lovely. Anyway, if you want to know more about OriginOS 6, I've published a full video guide type situation to it, which is live right now. It's for a bit of a squint at some of the best features, some of the supposed upgrades, etc, etc. And on the storage front, the base model of the iQOO 15 sports 256 gigs of this stuff. You can upgrade that to 512. Now there's also a 1 terabyte option. And all the regular features like eSIM, present and correct. So that 6.85-inch OLED display is actually slightly bigger than the previous generation. Bit of a cinephile's dream. Got a 3168 by 1440 pixel resolution once again, although you will need to actually activate this Ultra HD mode in the display settings. It's your typical gorgeous OLED panel with beautiful contrast. You've got full support for HDR10+ and Dolby Vision streaming in the likes of Netflix. And that Dolby Vision support actually fresh and new for this generation. On the maximum brightness hits around sort of 2500 nits, so everything is perfectly crystal clear. Even outdoors, even when that sun is actually shining. Apparently the iQOO 15 boasts that same polarized eye protection layer as before, which helps to reduce eye fatigue. And you've got PWM dimming at low brightness levels and DC dimming for higher brightness levels, so if you are sensitive to OLED flicker, well, hopefully no worries at all. And that refresh rate scales all the way from 1 singular measly hertz all the way up to 144 hertz, which is great news for gamers. You do get a super frame rate boost feature bunged in here as well, but I'll bang on about that in the performance and gaming section. And the iQOO 15 sports a pretty powerful stereo speaker setup as well. Certainly gets bloody loud when you boost that volume all the way up. That's perfectly fine for, again, your bit of Netflix or YouTube or whatever. No real bass to speak of though, and certainly music just sounds like a tinny mess, at least it does if you listen to shouty, angry metal music like I do, so highly recommend hooking up some Bluetooth headphones or something in those cases. While I experienced a few issues streaming to Bluetooth devices with the iQOO 13, thankfully I didn't experience any such issues here on the iQOO 15. It was perfectly well behaved. Of course, one of the highlights of last year's iQOO 13 was it was one of the very first to pack Qualcomm's latest Billy Big Bollocks Snapdragon chipset, and the iQOO 15 continues that trend. The brains of the operation here is the Snapdragon 8 Elite Gen 5, clunkily named, but a bit of a beefcake. It's backed here by 16 gigs of RAM. Of course, the iQOO 15 isn't the absolute first to come packing that Snapdragon. You've also got the likes of the OnePlus 15, the latest Red Magic gaming phone as well. It's backed here in the iQOO 15 by 12 or 16 gigs of RAM. I've got the 16 gig model for my review. And the everyday running has been absolutely fine. As I say, I do see the occasional wee janky animation, but I think that's more down to OriginOS than certainly the Snapdragon 8 Elite. And if you're a gamer, well, some great and perhaps completely unexpected news. The likes of Wuthering Waves played absolutely beautifully, even when it was maxed to the tits, full graphical extravagance. Yes, the iQOO 15 handled it ably, as you would expect from a phone powered by Qualcomm's crotch-thrustingly beef-tastic 8 Elite Gen 5. That frame rate remains perfectly stable, even when I was gaming for well over an hour of this thing. That's certainly helped along by Vivo's upgraded coolant tech. You've got graphite sheets, you've got your thermal gel, all that bollocks. The vapor chamber has apparently increased in size by 13% compared with the previous gen, and certainly the 15 only gets slightly warm when you're gaming for absolutely ages on that esports mode. Now, speaking of which, yes, you've got the usual dedicated gaming mode chucked on OriginOS. Includes all the basics, including screen recording, notifications, blocking, the usual performance shenanigans. And then of course that one-tap esports mode, which is ideal if you want the best possible performance out of this thing. You also want to block all those notifications and everything to stay perfectly focused. And believe me, your Uncle Spurt, decrepit old souse that I am, I need absolutely all the help I can get. And despite the ridiculous capabilities of that Snapdragon chipset, Vivo has also bunged in its own supercomputer chip, the Q3, fresh and new for this generation, to help out with some gaming shenanigans. Now, if you jump into the Ultra Game Mode section of the smartphone settings, you'll find some of the features that this Q3 enables. And what I really like here is that each feature is clearly explained, and then you get a full-on list of all of the supported titles with the option to install, and any games that you have installed that support them are listed right there at the top. I didn't install Block Blast, by the way, just another bit of crapware. You've got the likes of Super Resolution, which can boost the detail level. You've also got Super Frame Rate, which can really make the most of that 144Hz display. Yeah, I've got to admit, I personally can't notice a difference in Call of Duty when I enable the Super Resolution and Super Frame Rate, but you know, look at me, my eyes are buggered, my reactions are shot. I'm not exactly going to be an esports poster boy anytime soon. But that touchscreen responds beautifully to taps, swipes and frantic jabs, and the overall gaming experience excellent. Now another upgrade for this generation is the battery tech. You've now got a silicon anode cell stuffed inside of there. It's been upgraded in capacity from just over 6,000 mAh to 7,000 mAh. And of course the battery life has been absolutely excellent. Even if you're the kind of person who registers the screen on time well into the double digits each day, a single charge should still see you right through from breakfast to bedtime. Unless you happen to be shooting a shag load of 4K video or just gaming non-stop, of course. But even if you are gaming, well, pretty good news there. You can still enjoy just over 5 full hours of beating the same bloody boss guy over and over in Wuthering Waves, just so you can gather enough sparkle juice or jizz froth or whatever the bloody hell it is you need to actually upgrade your floppy head fire guy before the IQOO 15 finally gives up the ghost. Now the battery charging speeds have been slightly reduced over the previous generation. It used to be 120 watts, now it's 100 watt wired charging on the IQOO 15. But the good news is, despite the whopping great battery, you'll still achieve full charge in under an hour, with the proper equipment that is. But you also have the option of 40 watt wireless charging, huzzah! And so kiddies, let's conclude this lovely wee Vivo IQOO 15 smartphone review with a bit of a squint at the optics there. What you have here is a triple 50 meg camera setup, and as usual it's decent, if not quite mingling, with the best smartphone optics out there. So the main shooter uses Sony's IMX921 sensor, which is exactly the same sensor that was slapped in the old IQOO 13, somewhat disappointingly. Now this is a 1/1.56 inch sensor. It's not quite as large as what you'll find slapped in some rivals like the Oppo Find X9 Pro or the Poco F8 Ultra. It's more comparable to alternatives like the OnePlus 15, and while HDR scenarios are generally handled pretty well, in softer light you will notice a bit of grain creeping into your photos and colours are somewhat suffocated. Unless that is you swap to the dedicated landscape and night mode, in which case you get considerably brighter results, as long as you can actually keep your hand steady for a good few very long seconds. Now, occasionally this mode does somewhat rip the piss and expect you to stand still like this for about a minute or so while it captures these photos, which, as you would imagine, in the freezing bloody cold after 6 pints of bitter, not the most comfortable or pleasurable thing in the world to do, and of course if there's any motion then that buggers that right up. But there is no denying the fact that that night mode can work miracles when it's not being a twat. Now as usual, Vivo has set the IQOO 15 to vivid mode by default, which offers an iPhone-esque vibe and brightens your pics so colours look bold and striking. But no worries if you'd prefer a less artificial result, as you can swap to alternatives like the natural mode with a swift poke. Now the IQOO 15 does actually upgrade the telephoto shooter. This time it's the Sony IMX882, and that zoom action is thigh-strokingly enjoyable. You can pinch in pretty far to around roughly the 20x zoom level before that picture starts to get rather blocky. Unless of course you're shooting at night or in softer light again, where your photo will start to look rather flat and fuzzy well before that point. And then last up you've got yourself a 50 meg ultra wide angle shooter using that same old familiar Samsung GN1 sensor. And there's an immediately noticeable tonal shift when you swap to this from the Sony sensors. Things are usually a wee bit murkier in the evenings, but it's perfectly fine. But as with the previous generation, when you're trying to shoot a moving subject with the IQOO 15, doesn't matter which lens you use, it'll probably turn out blurry. That's even in clear daylight, so you will want to wait until your offspring, your fuzzy pal or whatever, is reasonably still before snapping them. For your video type shenanigans, you can shoot up to 8K resolution footage if you want to, but you will want to drop down to that 4K resolution if you want a bit of 60 frames per second action, or you just want to flip between the different lenses. And I found that my video footage generally turned out pretty well, at least until the lighting got a bit dim and then the image gets rather noisy. But as long as the light isn't CAC, you can expect a sharp picture with pretty vivid tones. You can zoom into around the sort of 3 to 5 times level and still get lovely crispy visuals, but don't punch in any further than that, as you get some rather pixelated picture quality. The stabilization's pretty good at that 4K resolution, a little bit stiff and robotic at times, but you don't suffer from any nasty judder. And the audio pickup is excellent, crystal clear from all directions, and not at all phased by a bit of gusty wind action. And then last up, around the front end of the IQOO 15, you've got yourself a 32 megapixel selfie shooter. And using that front-facing camera, you can record video at up to 4K resolution at 30 or 60 frames per second. It's not bad with the old HDR and all that, and the audio pickup. Again, pretty decent as long as it's not too gusty. And that right there, my lovelies, in a delicious and hopefully satisfying wee nutshell is what I reckon of the IQOO 15. Now, certainly if you're looking for something to enjoy games and movies on the go, you're quite a demanding user, getting lots of screen on time on the go every single day. Well, the IQOO 15 should more than satisfy. Got excellent performance, formidable battery life, and pretty decent media chops as well, despite the fact that the speakers aren't the best. Of course, you can certainly find better camera phones slapped on flagships out there in 2025, and OriginOS, it's pretty decent, got some good features packed in there, but still a wee bit messy and can be pretty bulky at times. Now, I've reviewed plenty of alternative options here on TechSpert in the past month or two. Feels like bloody dozens of the buggers, in fact. The likes of the OnePlus 15, again, not the best camera tech, but otherwise a banger. The Oppo Find X9 series, absolutely 100% a banger if you fancy some really good optics. I really like that Poco F8 Ultra as well, which is again pretty good if you want to just shave a few quid off the average flagship smartphone price. Well, that's what this semi-pickle northern prong reckons, but what do you guys think of the Vivo IQOO 15? Be great to hear your thoughts down in the comments below. Please do poke, subscribe, and ding that notifications bell for more on the latest and greatest tech. Have yourselves a ruddy, wonderful rest of the week. Cheers, everybody. Love you all.